end of the day, politics, I think one of the things that we do in this country is that we think politics don't matter, and politics is the basis of everything at life. Politics will affect your life. Even when you're dead, if you're not careful, politics will still be affecting you, because hey, they can wake up and say, oh, there's a law that says everybody that has been buried should be exhumed and thrown out of this, and it becomes a law. So because of that, there's a need for people to understand there's a convergence that needs to happen, where people need to come together and talk together. But most times we see politicians have mastered the art of doing that, but unfortunately citizens haven't, because we're so divided over different lines, whether ethnic, religious, or all of that. And then sometimes we think it's not really important. And unfortunately in our country, it's something that it's not taught right from when we're children, because we've had a very militarized background. Most of us growing up, we grew up under military, and so of course they weren't going to be discussing politics or teaching our children about politics or democracy, because then it was military, you just obey whatever is thrown at you. But we need to understand that it's 26 years now that Nigeria has started, being on this democratic journey, uninterrupted that it has been on, and there's a need for those that were born then, they are now 26 years old, they're almost 30, and so there's a need for us to understand that politics, democracy are things that we need to start teaching children right from when they're young. And so in that way, people will understand that they need to come together. Even when you have your personal differences, when it comes to political views, nation building and nationhood, statehood, we need to come together and work for the greater good. And I hope today that's what I hope to achieve in the panel that I'm going to be part of.
Composed of different tributaries, the legislature, which is the preeminent, we don't even seem to know, given the character of this particular National Assembly. This parliament is incredibly the first arm of government. It's not a dependent or appendage or subsidiary, ancillary arm of government. It is the people's parliament, the most representative even beyond the presidency. So the legislative branch, executive branch, you have the judiciary, you have civil society, you have national formations, you have the media for the state of the realm, you have other key ingredients around which you build a state. And that state, of course, is made up of territorial integrity, the coercive apparatus of the state using the army, police, and so on. All these are the things you constitute the state. So the state actually doesn't represent everybody. The state represents the government through which it expresses its will. That's why people contend with any government in power that says, I represent everybody. Say, no, you don't represent everybody. So the idea of the state is not in terms of structuralist distribution. This is the structure of the state. You have the federal, you have the subnational at the state level, you have the local government system, you have other indices that describe what a state looks like. As I said, civil society, the media, etc., nationality groupings. A state can be described equally as function, the functional approach. That means there is a reduction of conflict. If you know what your function is in a state, the business community, the corporate players, civic groups, the media, the government of the day have described functions. If you now put these functions together in totality and in coherence, a state is assumed to be functioning very well. But the last one is the one that attracts me. The first two, like Karl Marx, we say, philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The functional way, the structural way. The problem is, how do we change it? The business of changing society brings out what we call materialistic historiography, that the history of mankind is described in materialist terms, not in idealistic terms. What we call stomach infrastructure. That is what Karl Marx found. That there is contestation between members of a community in the struggle for survival. That means if you have 7 pieces of meat in a soup, and there are 3 of you, one man has gobbled 2 or 3, going for the 4th one, there's a problem. You may dip your hand and say, hold it there. You've taken 4, I've not taken 1. That struggle from ancient times to today, whether in Marxist terms or neo-Marxist terms or even anti-Marxist terms, is what describes societal relationships. So conflict or collision will always occur where the interests of different groups or classes or segments of the society do what? Conflict. They collide. Because what you want is not what I want. This fellow wants is not what the other fellow wants. It is struggle to now determine who gets what. Conflicts are bound to occur. Consensus building and cooperation is a product of conflictual situations. That means we have this conflict. It may end the life of all of us. It may imperil society. It may jeopardize social progress. It may harm cohesion and national stability. Therefore, we have to come together, find a way to sit at the table and sort out our differences. You will get to that in the evolution of modern Nigerian society up to where we are today. That idea is to lay the groundwork. That the history of every hitherto existing society, Marx said, is a history of class struggle. It may not be classical classes in the ancient times as he saw it, but history of social struggle, intergroup struggle, party struggle of PDP, of APC, of Labour Party, and so on. Different interests there of the Labour fighting government, corporate leaders fighting Labour. So the history of every society is a history of group struggle. And most of these struggles are political in nature. Because the political economy of power is who gets what, why, where, how, and when. Once you describe who gets what at every point in time, how you get it, why you get it, and where you get it, you can now begin to understand the character of a state. So that's my first premise, that the idea of the state is a state that does not represent everybody. It represents a unit of power that is dominant and hegemonic within the social formation. Two, that the nature of power is to express itself not for the satisfaction of everybody, no matter what the grand claim may well be, but for the satisfaction of the constituency of those within the power, while the residual patronages can come to the rest of society. If you move forward, you will observe that if you practicalize what I've just described in the birth of our nation in 1914, how was the country bettered? Many believe it was inconvenient, it was contingent, even when the geography was well described. Therefore, it was inorganic. Inorganic formation of a state is when a state is willed into being, most of the time by external pressure and external aggression, by external force, willed into existence. Whether you love that union or not, you are compelled by force of circumstances beyond their control to become part of that domain, that site. So 1914, nobody clearly conducted a referendum or plebiscite or some sort of democratic exercise to say, all of you here gathered, do you want to belong to a country called Nigeria? Nobody did that. Treaties were signed, gumbo diplomacy was applied, harassments, intimidations, sometimes corrupt practices, persuasions, and so on, and people together came to say, we formed the Southern and the Northern Protectorate and the colony of Lagos. That is Nigeria. So you can actually repudiate that formation and say it is ahistorical, contingent, and does not actually represent the totality of the mindset of people inside it. You may say that that conglomeration is full of different social groups, different nationalities, different faith sentiments, different linguistic affinities, different cultural expressions. How can you bring all these things together to form a cohesive and a coherent nation state? That has been the argument against colonialism. But the only redemption of colonialism is not even its post-enlightenment claim of modernity. That means out of the darkness of the order, the luminosity of Europe will shine. The barbaric nations of Africa, including Nigeria, will have to taste civilization. That means the darkness can only be illumined by the brightness of Europe. From the Enlightenment to the formation of Nigeria, the idea is rationality, It's a very important, theme. For me, it speaks not only to our past, it speaks not only to our present, it speaks to our future. Politics of collisions or disputations or conflicts and convergence or consensus building defines who we are as a nation. Not only Nigeria, defines other nations too. Conflicts are bound to occur in human relations, in human politics, in aspiration for power. but how you manage the conflicts. These conflicts matter to the overall health of our democracy, to social cohesion and national stability. From our history, even before independence, from 1914 to 1960, from 1960 to the present moment, Nigeria has grappled with these politics of coalitions and politics of consensus or politics of accommodation. The First Republic suffered because of the inability of the leader to manage these conflicts very well or judiciously. Second Republic crumbled too because of this inability. The Third Republic was short-lived, not because of the political class, but because of the annulment of the June 12th election. Happily, this democracy, in quote, anyway, has endured for 26 years. There is expectations that the people have not been met. Human infrastructure has not been built. Human security has not been guaranteed. But at least in normative terms, in formal terms, democracy continues. We do hope that the political elite of this country will find it in themselves to manage conflicts, manage differences, manage their colliding forces, build a big consensus, using that to aspire to build overarching national consensus for the good of Nigeria and the good of our democracy. Thank you.